Sharing time with my colleagues, and I'm pleased to tell the House I'll be sharing that time equally with them. Can I start by stating that I want to welcome the bill which has been brought before the House this evening by the Labour Party, and Fianna Fáil will be supporting that piece of legislation. I think it's important to note at the outset, Ceann Comhairle, that for centuries women in Ireland, and indeed women throughout the world, have been discriminated against. Not only have they been treated as second-class citizens, but they've been deprived some of the basic rights that men took for granted for centuries. This year we celebrate the centenary of women getting the vote in 1918. That was a very significant event, but it's important to recall also that there was significant opposition to that. It wasn't always the case that the path of women's suffrage and rights for women was supported by the political establishment. And it's worth pointing out that I suppose some of the biggest opponents of giving women the right to vote prior to 1918 were members of the Irish Party. And indeed, not only John Redmond, but Mr Carson, as a member of the Irish Unionist Alliance, was also vigorously opposed to giving women the right to vote. And some Irish MPs were different in that they supported universal suffrage. But the political establishment prior to 1918 were very much opposed to women getting the vote. And then we look at when the Free State was established, that I think it was in 1932, the marriage bar came in that prevented women from working in the civil service. Many women, mothers of all of us, I've no doubt, had to give up jobs once they married, and that was only got rid of in 1973. And then gradually, legislation, prompted to a large extent by the European Economic Community, as it was known then, resulted in greater rights being given to women in the workplace. We saw in 1977 the Employment Equality Act being introduced. That was an important piece of legislation introduced by another member of the Labour Party, former Taoiseach Michael O'Leary, a man who appears to have been airbrushed out of Irish history, but he did play a significant role in terms of improving the path for the equality of women in the workplace. Then my own party in 1998 introduced the Employment Equality Act that ensured that equality on the basis of gender was upheld in the workplace. And that also was a significant piece of work and a significant achievement. Where we are today is that, unfortunately, we still have not attained full equality for women in the workplace. And the statistics reveal that at present there is a gender pay gap. I note what the Minister says in respect of the causes of that. It's not necessarily the case that the reason for the gender pay gap is the fact that the laws, whether it be the Employment Equality Act or of 1977 or indeed 1998, are being breached. But the fact of the matter is that that pay gap exists, and we as an Oireachtas have to do something in respect of it. We're in the fortunate position where I think the public sector has led the way for many years. There's no suggestion or contemplation that any member of this House should be paid more because he's a man than a female TD. That also applies throughout the public sector in the civil service. Where the problem appears to lie significantly is in the private sector. I think this piece of legislation is a very useful piece of legislation in terms of trying to deal with what is a complex problem. One of the first stands that you must make in order to deal with a problem is to disclose the problem. I think if companies over a certain size are required to publish information in respect of the gender pay gap, well then that focuses attention on the issue. Once attention is focused on the issue, well then we can start to resolve it, and it will become a more obvious requirement for companies to ensure that they do not have a significant gender pay gap. As has been mentioned, the gender pay gap, which has been statistically examined in this country, is at present around 14%. We note as well that where the problem appears most significant is at the higher end of the workforce. And that's a question that really needs to be examined closely and answered. We should not permit a situation to develop where there is any breach of, in terms of discrimination, in terms of the amount women are paid from men at the higher levels or at the lower levels. I'm going to hand over to my colleague now, Deputy Chambers.